Well, hello and a very warm welcome to the first ever episode of BA Fringe, the live stream show that focuses on celebrating things at the edges of business analysis, whether that's talking about intersecting disciplines, those other disciplines that we perhaps ought to get to know a little bit better, or those tools and techniques that perhaps should be core in our toolbox, but we've forgotten about and should bring back to the core. And I'm really excited to say that we have a great lineup for you today, viewer. Today we have 4 guests speaking on a range of topics that will be of interest to you, whether you're a BA or even if you are in an intersecting or different discipline. We're going to be talking to Darryl Brisset-Dowe, who's going to be talking about cybersecurity, a topic that I'm sure is relevant for many of us as consumers as well as analysts and change practitioners. Kay Hardy is going to be talking to us about rich pictures. We have Nick de Voil, who is going to be talking about user experience, and Christina Lovelock, who's going to be talking about business analysis and delivering business analysis as a service. Now, we were completely bowled away by your response to this idea of the BA Fringe. We sold out all of the socially distanced virtual seats in the Zoom webinar room, so we're simultaneously streaming live to YouTube. Now, if you're in the Zoom room, you'll be able to chat with other people in the Zoom room. But if you're not and you want to get in touch with us here at the studio, well, the good news is that there's actually a WhatsApp line where you can contact us. So if you're in the UK, you can actually ring this number, old school. Don't worry, it won't be a person that answers, it's a voicemail. You can leave us a voicemail and we might give you a shout out. If you're outside of the UK or if you just prefer WhatsApp, you can give us a WhatsApp on +44 330 321 8281, and we'll do as many shout outs as we can as the show progresses. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first segment. Now, I first met Kay Hardy at the BA Conference Europe 2019, and I was absolutely blown away by her enthusiasm for the topic of rich pictures. So I was really pleased when she agreed to do a short video for us to explain what rich pictures are and why, as BAs, we should engage with them. Kay is a senior consultant at Capita Software Services. So Kay, over to you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kay Hardy, and today I'm going to talk about rich pictures and how to use them in problem investigation. It's a great technique to use to document and capture a very messy and complex situation. From the information, we can then use this to analyze and investigate the problem further. The technique has no standard notation. It is more intuitive and requires less training than a lot of our other techniques. But because there is no standard notation, it can be quite daunting for some people to use. So here are 4 typical elements I would recommend you capture in your rich picture. The first element is people and their concerns. And make sure to label your people, as one stick figure could look very much like the next stick figure. Secondly, it's any structures. These could be physical or organizational. An example of a physical structure might be a geographical site. And an example of an organizational structure could be an organizational chart. Then we want to consider capturing any processes, and then finally, any conflicts. Now, you might want to capture rich pictures through running a workshop with your stakeholders, and together you produce a rich picture together. Or, if you don't have that opportunity, you could consider studying some background materials and producing a rich picture from that. So information you could consider looking at is a PID, a project initiation document, any terms of reference, MOST, so mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics, and statement of business values. Well, now what? Now that you've captured a rich picture, what do we do with it? Well, this is where we want to analyze opinions, concerns, ideas a little further. We want to find out what is factual and what is an opinion. We want to make sure that the problem statement that we were given at the beginning is where the real problem lies and ensure that we solve the right problem. So how do we do this? Well, we can use a Ishikawa diagram alongside our rich picture to do some root cause analysis. We might also consider using a BAM, a business activity model diagram, to capture our stakeholder perspectives. If you want to conduct a rich picture session virtually, there are a number of tools online that are incredibly helpful. My favorite is Miro because it has an icon search functionality, which I find very helpful. But there are other software out there that could help you. But running a virtual session, there are some other considerations to bear in mind to make sure you run a smooth session. Here are 3 tips. The first tip is it's more easy to be disengaged in a virtual session. So I like to keep my group sizes a little smaller than I typically would for a face-to-face session. So a maximum number of 5 people seem to be a good number. 2 is to make sure that your stakeholders are comfortable with operating the software. It's great if everybody wants to participate in the virtual rich picture by physically drawing themselves or using the icon search themselves. But another way to do this is to just do a screen share of the rich picture. You can guide and ask and facilitate and ask participants questions while helping them to build the rich picture on your side. And the final tip is to make sure that you are very confident in using the software yourself. You've practiced it. You've set up the board beforehand and sent out the links to participants if they're all going to log in and construct the rich picture together. And you know how to navigate the screen. Thank you for listening to this session. I hope you have fun with your rich picture.
Well, fantastic. And I'm sure we'll all agree that Kay gave a really fantastic overview of the rich picture technique there. And I know I'm now thinking, I'm a fan of that technique anyway, but it's one I definitely want to use more. So I'd like to introduce our next guest now, because we've actually got a live guest. This is someone who I'm sure will be known to many of us. I'm very pleased to say Christina Lovelock is joining us. Now, many of you will know Tina from one of her presentations at the many conferences that she's spoken at. Tina leads a BA team at the University of Leeds and also co-authored this fantastic book, Delivering Business Analysis, the BA Service Handbook. And Tina joins us live now. So Tina, Portsmouth calling, can you hear us?
Hi Adrian, thank you so much for that welcome. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a pleasure, Tina, always a pleasure. So we've immediately, before speaking to you here, we heard about Kay Hardy, or we heard Kay Hardy talk about rich pictures. And of course, we know that they originated from Checkland's soft systems methodology. And I was wondering, do you use rich pictures? And also, do you think that we as practitioners should perhaps look beyond the obvious BA techniques in our work?
Well, I'm a big fan of visuals and visual thinking. I have to admit, I haven't been the biggest fan of rich pictures in the past, but I was fortunate enough to go to Kay's session at Business Analysis Europe conference last year, and I have to say she really converted me and convinced me of the usefulness of that technique. In terms of what techniques we can add to our toolkit, how we can borrow from other professions. I think that's really interesting. So I think we absolutely should be on the lookout for other interesting techniques that are useful and help us communicate with our different types of stakeholders. I also think we should be encouraging other disciplines to use some of our techniques. And there's a whole set of techniques which are probably in the middle. So something like the SWOT analysis technique, for example, I've seen project managers use a lot, but we would certainly say that that's in the business analysis discipline. So I think being open to sharing techniques and learning from other disciplines is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that idea of intersecting disciplines where none of us really own the technique and we can collaborate and look at the overlaps in the Venn diagram. And you mentioned project management, but of course there's user experience, systems thinking, many other areas as well. So I was fortunate enough to see a copy of your book before it was published. And well, the book you co-authored with Debbie Paul, and I know I initially said, well, I can't read through the whole thing before it's sort of released, but I will provide a quote. I'll read as much as I could, and I ended up just reading it from cover to cover because it was like as much as of a page turner as a book can be. It really was for a
you got addicted.
Yeah, I did. I got drawn in, and one of the things I really liked about it was the BA Service Catalogue. And that's a concept that people who haven't read the book might not be familiar with. If someone hasn't heard of that before, how would you describe it and why is it important?
I think the idea of a service catalogue is really important for business analysis because we've suffered for a long time from role ambiguity, people not really understanding what the role is or what we have to offer. Developing a set of services, which are going to be slightly different in every organisation, really allows a business analysis practice to set its stall out and say, this is what we offer, and this is how we think it offers value to you. It makes it a lot easier for our customers to understand what business analysis is and how to engage it and how it will be a benefit to them.
Fantastic. So, and I can imagine that will also help with the role ambiguity, as you mentioned, because actually if we've got a menu of services and these are the things that we do, and by implication there are some other things that we don't normally do, it actually makes perhaps describing that value proposition easier because we can say, well, you know, here's the services, here's the outcomes we can help you provide.
It gives a lot of flexibility because there'll be different specialist roles in every organisation. Some will have business architects, some will have user researchers. Where those roles don't exist, that might form part of the business analysis service catalogue. So it's really about that flexibility and being able to work with and collaborate with some of the roles that we have to work with all the time, being clear on some of those boundaries and separations.
Definitely, fantastic. Well, we actually have a question that's come in from an audience member. It's quite a tricky one, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit with this one, Tina. But Sally asks, how do BAs work differently with DevOps teams? So, so big question.
It is a big question, but we'll have a go in the time that we've got. So I think BAs have got such a lot to offer that space. I think one of the ways that we can offer value in that space is that we're able to think and remember back to the big picture, linking to organisational objectives and not getting lost in the day-to-day delivery of features. So I think that's one thing that BAs can do, that thinking big. The other thing that I think is really important is, and you mentioned it before, Adrian, is our communication skills. And that is so important for any development team, particularly in that DevOps kind of environment. We need to be working with different roles, in particularly championing the users as we do in all settings. Now, DevOps puts a lot of emphasis on the product owner role, and that being the sole person who's representing the entire user community. That's a lot on one person. So business analysts can use our tools and techniques to get that wider business input in a timely way, so that it's not all falling onto the shoulders of a product owner, and that we can represent those different views and perhaps from areas that a product owner is not as familiar with. I think the trap, though, and the challenge can be that we can become a bit of a subject matter expert in that space, and we don't have the opportunity to practice using the skills and the toolkit that, as we've already mentioned, the role can become quite narrow.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge for BAs to make sure that they're using their full toolkit.
That's it. We can become a bit typecast, or we can sort of have issues where we perhaps people don't see the breadth of what we do, and I suspect we've all experienced that as practitioners from time to time. So if people haven't read your book yet, Tina, or you know, if they haven't read it yet, And if there was one or a couple of takeaways that you'd really want people to take away from your book, what would those takeaways be?
I really want to stress the point about thinking of business analysis as a service. And that means not just delivering the service that you think that you want to deliver for your organisation, but really listening to customers, understanding from them what they need and how we can help. And for any service, that means we need to measure effectiveness and finding ways to do that. And that'll be internal metrics, but also things like customer feedback. So that whole service approach to business analysis, I think, is so important and can really help organisations move forward with their BA maturity.
Yeah, interesting. We should actually turn some of the analysis back on ourselves and think of business analysis as a service, and think about the people we work with as service users or service consumers, so that we can get their feedback and those external measures as well. Yeah. So
and all those techniques that we do use to help our stakeholders to improve processes, as you mentioned, we can use a lot of those to help improve our practices.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Tina, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We could talk about this for hours, but we've reached the end of our allotted time slot. So thank you so much for the insight, and thank you for joining us here on BA Fringe this evening.
Thanks so much, Adrian.
Thank you. And I'm sure those of you that are tuning in live, or even if you're watching the recording, will want to get your hands on a copy of Tina's book. Well, the good news is that BCS, the publisher, have actually made a discount available to anyone who's watching this show or is watching the recording. It's good until the end of the month. You can get 25% off Christina's book, or Nick, who's on the show a little bit later, by visiting shop.bcs.org and using the code BA Fringe. There will also be the chance to win a copy later in the show, so do stay tuned for that as well. So if you do have a comment, if you have an idea, remember you can of course use the BA Fringe hashtag on social media, and we'll pick up as many of those as we can along the way. So let's move on to our next topic, an increasingly relevant topic, which is cyber security. I suspect this is a topic that is worrying us not just as business analysts, but also as consumers, as there seems to be more phishing, and there's even things like vishing now. And it was only recently I learnt what vishing is. And I'm really pleased to say that Darryl Brisset-Dowe agreed to do a short segment for us on cybersecurity and what it means for us as BAs. So I'd like to introduce Darryl Brisset-Dowe, who is a principal consultant and cybersecurity enthusiast. Darryl has a wide range of experience as a business consultant and as a BA, including lean process improvement, agile software development, and has a real enthusiasm for cybersecurity. So Darryl, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Darryl Brisset-Dowe and I'm a business consultant / business analyst. And I became interested in cybersecurity a couple of years ago when a family member of mine nearly lost hundreds of pounds to a criminal online. It happened so quickly within the space of 15 or 20 minutes. And I started to think about the kind of things that I need to be aware of to protect myself and my family. And then this expanded into challenges that businesses have, and actually the kind of things I can do as part of my day-to-day role as a business consultant. So then this year, 2020, COVID-19 threw technology and cybersecurity into sharp focus. And in this short video, I'm going to be talking about cybersecurity challenges and how business analysts can help. So 2020, what a crazy year it's been. The global pandemic of COVID-19 has forced organisations to change the way that they do business. And if digital transformation wasn't high on the radar before, it certainly is now. So in the UK, many of us have been working from home since February or March, which has meant that we're using technology more than ever before. And as much as the increased usage of tech has ensured that businesses keep running, teams continue to collaborate, friends and family stay connected, it also means that there are more opportunities for cyber criminals to exploit us. So, for example, in May 2020, Deloitte confirmed that phishing attacks had gone up by 600% since lockdown. So let's talk a bit about cybersecurity threats. So the fast-changing landscape of technology increases our vulnerability to cyber attacks. And actually, this has been the case even before the pandemic. So in the UK in 2018, for example, 88% of the data breaches reported to the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, were down to human factors. So what does that mean? So human factors or human errors can be split into technology-enabled errors and non-technology enabled errors. So some examples of this include technology-enabled, so that's falling victim to phishing, so email attacks, so clicking on a link or a document, vishing, which is voice attacks, so someone calling and pretending to be someone else, smishing, which is SMS attacks via text, poor password hygiene, and actually insecure coding and misconfiguration of cloud storage is considered as technology-enabled human errors. And non-technology enabled errors, examples of this include loss or theft of paperwork, loss or theft of devices, sensitive information left on whiteboards, or accidental disclosure of information in a situation where a person could be on the phone in a cafe or on the train and divulged information and someone's overheard it. So humans are the most important part of any technology or cybersecurity program. And planning around human factors is a critical part of the planning and implementation process. And the reason for this is because humans are involved at every single stage. So it isn't just your end users. Humans determine the need for new technologies. Humans determine the need for new processes and define those process standards. Humans design and code the applications that are developed in-house. Humans decide how to respond to suspicious incidents, and humans are employees, contractors, shareholders, and customers. So all people contribute to the security posture of an organization. And the security posture, so I'm introducing a new term here, so that refers to an organization's overall cybersecurity strength and how well it can predict, prevent, and respond to ever-changing cyber threats. And organizations need help with addressing a wide range of threats to their security posture. And working in an ever-changing landscape with more interconnected systems and distributed tech, security needs to be looked at each step. So business analysts are in a great position to help with an organization's security posture because they can help to ensure that technology is secure by design. So security is discussed and baked in from the beginning and not left to the end of a project. Business analysts can help to raise cybersecurity awareness and ensure that approaches are human-centric. And business analysts can feed into the need for a more diverse cybersecurity workforce. So I'm going to expand on each of these now. So the role of a BA in cybersecurity, so helping to ensure that technology is secure by design. So as business analysts, we should be driving these conversations with key stakeholders, such as product owners from the very beginning. So many years ago, a BA would elicit requirements from stakeholders, and the security requirements would be written in as non-functional. And that came with an assumption that a role such as the security subject matter expert will just deal with that at some point further down the line. And in far too many cases, security would be bolted on to the end of an engagement. So business analysts need to include security from the start, and security should be part of holistic analysis, the holistic business analysis, and should not be separate. So BA should be looking at security as an important aspect of a digital engagement. So in order to do this effectively, BAs must consider the human factors. So we previously discussed the 88% of data breaches in the UK being down to human errors, which were either technology or non-technology enabled. So human factors must be critical I mean, they are critical. It's a critical part of the planning and implementation process. And this presents a huge opportunity for BAs to bring in many tools and techniques to help to raise awareness, embed understanding, improve uptake, and mitigate things like insecure coding and misconfiguration of cloud storage. BAs need to be able to ask key questions and include cybersecurity SMEs in the conversation from the very beginning. So alongside the core tools and knowledge, BAs should be building cybersecurity and awareness ourselves so that we can ask the key questions. So for example, if we're having conversations about storage, i.e. cloud or on-prem, we may not know the answers about a particular domain, but we must think about what it is that we need to verify and include the security subject matter experts to answer questions and ensure there's a clear link to the business and stakeholder requirements. We can use our facilitation skills to enable these conversations. We can also model stakeholder requirements. So some examples include ensuring internal stakeholders are on the same page when it comes to cybersecurity. So working with product owners, infrastructure teams, dev and test teams from the beginning. Also, understanding risk management and disaster recovery. So talking to stakeholders, finding out their risks and what's critical to them. So preempt, if there was a cybersecurity attack, what are the critical data assets? And BA should have an understanding of what happens if something goes wrong, i.e. disaster recovery, and what is the impact if access to these critical assets are restricted or lost. As BAs, we should have an awareness of regulatory requirements and compliance, and should be actively talking to people in the privacy area and looking at policies and standards. So BAs can also help to elicit and write up scenarios that stakeholders say are important to them. So this can be done by creating use cases, user stories, and ultimately more effective acceptance criteria. And this is a really, really great way to get customers engaged in the process. And BAs can help to bake security into the solutions. And also key to this is understanding threat actors. So what's a threat actor? So this is a broad term used to describe a person or an entity who has the ability or intent to impact the security of individuals or companies. So to keep up with the ever-evolving capabilities of threat actors, as business analysts, we need to consider threat actors as stakeholders. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but we need to model these stakeholder requirements in an engagement. So a way that this could be done is including personas of cyber threat actors, looking at the kind of things that they would do, and then pull that into some of the work you're doing with the testing team to see if they can try and break the system and then ultimately create a more robust system. Another key area that business analysts can help is to raise cybersecurity awareness and ensure that approaches are human-centric. So a way to think about this is to answer the question, who's responsible for cybersecurity? Everyone in the business is responsible. So it impacts all of us and we all have a part to play. Think of it like we're all in the same household and we all have a responsibility to act in a secure way to keep our possessions safe. So as BAs, we're already working in cyber, whether it's directly or not. So there's a need to raise and embed awareness of security needs. So as I've already mentioned, humans are the most important part of the technology program and they're involved at every stage. So it's important for people to feel empowered and given the tools to make secure decisions. And BAs can also contribute to change management approaches, which includes understanding the impact on stakeholders, tailoring communication, helping with building effective training programs that take into account things such as something that's my personal interest, how humans behave and why they make the decisions that they do and the impact it could have on the project, and also how humans learn. So looking at different methods of communication, such as visualization and using the power of storytelling to bring things to life. So I briefly covered two key areas that business analysts can add value, cybersecurity. But another key consideration is that increasing cyber threats are driving the need for a diverse cybersecurity workforce. So what does this mean for BAs? So my take is that organisations should not underestimate the importance of having a blended team. So in order to address the future challenges and cyber attacks, it's critical to have the presence of diverse perspectives. And the dangers of groupthink are present in technology and cybersecurity, and a business analyst can bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, and a different perspective to the table, as well as help to create and facilitate an inclusive environment to harness those different perspectives of a wider team. So business analysts can already add a lot of value in cybersecurity, but it's important for BAs to look into ongoing learning and development in this area. So from today, BAs can work closely with subject matter experts and start to build up that awareness and understanding from now. But also, it just so happens that this year, the International Institute of Business Analysis, IIBA, have launched a business analysis and cybersecurity course. So you can search for it online and check out the modules and to give you a sense of areas that are very relevant. So thank you for your time. I've enjoyed talking to you. And if you have any further questions, then please get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Darryl, for a really, really interesting and quite a thorough overview of cybersecurity there. I see we've got quite a lot of comments in the chat on Zoom because some of you I know are on Zoom, some of you are attending via YouTube Live, so I will read some of those comments out in just a second. But I just wanted to let you know about a competition that we're running. So IIBA, the International Institute for Business Analysis, as Darryl mentioned, have this year released the certification in cybersecurity analysis, and you could win. If you're the sort of person that likes sitting exams, or if you want a few more letters after your name, we have one voucher for a free exam to be given away. And what you need to do in order to win the voucher is you need to, again, get on social media and start gloating. So you can use LinkedIn or you can use Twitter, use the BA Fringe hashtag and tag IIBA. That if you type at IIBA on Twitter, you'll find them, and at IIBA on LinkedIn, you'll find them there as well. And you can just share your biggest takeaway from this show so far. Bonus points, by the way, if you take a little bit of a selfie with yourself against the main point as well. So do make the most of that competition. Just post on LinkedIn or Twitter your biggest takeaway so far with the BA Fringe hashtag and tag IIBA on there, as I'm sure many of you will do. So before we introduce our next guest, I just wanted to read out a few of the things which are in the chat for those of you that are tuning in via YouTube. As I say, we filled out the Zoom virtual auditorium very early on in proceedings, so you may well be joining via YouTube. Rebecca says that she loves the idea of thinking of business analysis as a service. And that's a really interesting thought, isn't it? Actually, if we think about our stakeholders as consumers of a service, then maybe that would change the way we talk about what we do. And it puts more of a focus on the value and the value proposition. Because quite often, of course, I'm sure we've all done it, we've complained about being misunderstood as business analysts. But actually, if we don't articulate our value, then people won't necessarily buy into our services. We have, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, we have Shipperly, who says cybersecurity at times can be classed as a technical capability. In which case, do you think a business architect might be better placed to have that conversation? That will be a really interesting question. What we can do, Shipley, is we can put that to Darryl offline. But I think from certainly from Darryl's initial sort of conversation there, I think perhaps one perspective might be that whilst it is sometimes seen as a technical capability, well, you know what, actually, it's often that the technology is hard enough, but you know, if there's a data breach or if there's an issue with password security, that can be the human factors that Darryl mentioned. And of course, Darryl mentioned threat actors as well. And as business analysts, we're very, very well attuned to think about stakeholders. And I love the idea of thinking about threat actors, perhaps a hacker or something like that. Rushma asks, do you have any examples of rich pictures that you can share? Well, if you're live on YouTube or indeed on in the chat, and if you have an example, please do post it. I certainly have a few, so if you do want to see a few examples, just get in touch with me through LinkedIn or one of the other channels there. So with that in mind, I'm really pleased to say that we have our next topic to discuss and our next guest. It gives me great pleasure to introduce live Nick de Voil. Now, I've known Nick for about a decade, I think it is, Nick. We met originally through IIBA, the IIBA UK chapter, and I've learned a lot from Nick. In fact, Nick, there was something you said 10 years ago about the boundary of the business analysis role, which sticks with me still today, which was basically along the lines of, we made the boundary up, so it's for us to define where it should be. Nick is a very, very experienced practitioner, consultant practitioner. He's very into systems thinking, as am I, but very, very notably is the author of a book that was out just a few weeks ago from BCS, User Experience Foundations. So Nick, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Hi Adrian, it's my pleasure, good to be here.
Fantastic. So Nick, you wrote the book User Experience Foundations. Can you briefly tell us what UX is and why it should matter to us as BAs?
Well, user experience is about the subjective experience that a person has or will have or did have when they interact with a particular system or service or product. And a lot of the history and the ideas and the language in the field are to do with the design of the user interface for software or for online applications. But actually, the principles are all completely applicable to understanding and improving the way that a person interacts with or interfaces with your organization through any channel, not just using software or website. So at the end of the day, it's the experience that your customers have that determines whether or not your work is a success. So I'd say it's pretty important for BAs.
Absolutely, and I thought it was really interesting what you were saying there, Nick, about interfaces, because if we take a traditional requirements engineering view of the world, we might say that, well, out in the world there are business events, and business events get chucked across a system boundary, whatever that system is. It could be an organizational or business system, and the business has to respond, and those interfaces could be a phone, it could be a WhatsApp message, it could be an in-person, someone checking in at an airport. I mean, not these days probably, but that sort of thing. And all of those things are user experience. And you're right, all of them are interfaces. So very, very relevant for us as BAs.
Yes, I agree.
Fantastic. So our previous guest, Darryl, was talking about cybersecurity. And I think a perception that I have, and I suspect others have, is there's sometimes a bit of a healthy tension, shall we say, between cybersecurity on the one hand and usability and user experience on the other. Because to be very, very secure, the perception sometimes is that you have to have, passwords that you can't remember, and but those sorts of security elements, it's perceived, can affect user experience. Whereas if you have a very, very friction-free user experience, that might mean you're compromising security. Do you think that's a real conflict? Is there real tension there, or is there some happy medium somewhere in between?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it is definitely a thing. I think we've all come across that problem, you know, being frustrated when we're trying to use an application of some sort by the security measures that are there, no doubt about it. But I think, you know, what it tells us is that as business analysts know, systems and products and services they're ultimately all about people, or what we like to call stakeholders, and different groups of people have different things that they need out of a system. And it's often the job of a BA to help reconcile those needs and find the best way forward. I think one of the dangers for business analysts is that they do tend to break problems down into little pieces. You know, the clue is in the name, analyst. That's what analysis means, really, breaking things down into little pieces. And of course, that's a good thing to do. That's an important thing to do. But if you want to deliver something that's good, something that's really going to be useful and usable and make a positive contribution to people's lives, that's where a design type mentality comes in. And one thing that I have found when I've been training business analysts in user experience is that a lot of them are really quite unfamiliar with that idea of taking a design focus. You need to look at the solution in a holistic way. And I'd argue the most sensible yardstick for evaluating designs is, do they work for people? What's the experience like? And UX is all about making sure that's the case, keeping a focus on that throughout the project life cycle, not just, you know, in a user acceptance test at the end. So we don't want to be writing these down as separate non-functional requirements or technical requirements. Let's say the user must be able to log in 30 seconds, or the system must be secured according to such and such a protocol, and then testing those in isolation. We want to be coming up with something that will work for users, and we know will work for users, and we do usability testing to ensure that. And I think one of the reasons security often in practice does seem to win out over usability is that security requirements are easier to write down, and usability requirements are sometimes not specified very well. And that's something that I cover in the book.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I like what you said there, Nick, about that idea of user testing and iterating and sort of discovering as you go along the usability elements of a solution. And the idea of design, that really interested me as well, because, you know, one thing that I'm really pleased about, when IIBA released version 3 of the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, the BA Bot Guide, it made it much clearer that there's a blurry edge between requirements and design. And perhaps previously we were led to believe that, you know, BAs do requirements and designers do design. But there's always a middle ground, because, you know, if you design a process and it's a physical process, well, you are designing work, you know. So actually acknowledging that fuzzy middle, that intersection, seems quite significant as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So with that in mind, Nick, I know that there are a whole range of techniques referenced in your book. If there were like one or a few techniques from the world of UX, user experience, that you think BAs really ought to know about, what would that technique or those techniques be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. You know, if you're thinking about techniques, there are some really good ones in there. There are some that BAs are quite familiar with. I find already things like personas, for example. A lot of BAs know about personas by now, to some extent. So that's where you're making up a fictitious user that represents a segment of your user base. That's very helpful for, you know, getting focus, making sure that your solution is doing the right things. Things like journey mapping. I think journey mapping is a fantastic technique for understanding the things that users have to go through at the moment in your as-is situation. and also the things that you would like them to go through in the future in your to-be situation. There's things like affinity mapping, empathy mapping. There's some more detail specific things there, like card sorting, which is a fantastic way of really getting inside users' heads and understanding the way they think about the situation, their mental model of the situation. But I think probably the most important and most useful thing, possibly the most unexciting sounding thing, which is prototyping and usability testing. So, you know, which you referred to just now. So creating prototypes and using usability testing, not just to verify what your solution does is okay, but actually to use it as an elicitation technique, a formative technique, if you like, a way of feeling your way towards a good solution and being prepared to do that over and over again, not just once at the end of the project.
Absolutely. So that iterative discovery, and I don't know about you, Nick, but I find that sometimes prototypes are interesting because, you know, you elicit some requirements or some user needs, and I find I create a prototype, but then I can scrape requirements from the prototype because people don't know what they want until they see it. And
absolutely, no, of course they don't. No, you know, that's not their job.
Yeah, and then we go around that loop again, and things get better and get tighter, and then we end up, as you say, you know, building things that people actually want to use rather than perhaps some of the previous sorts of systems and interfaces that we've worked on where they don't want to use them. So we've had a question come in, Nick, from an audience member, which is about it's about the overlap if you've got a business analyst on a team and if you've got a specialist UX researcher or UX person. How can they work in harmony together? I think that's a great question. I'm glad I'm glad this is your question and not mine, Nick.
It's a fabulous question, and I mean the answer is, of course, it does largely depend. It depends on the context. It depends on who else is in the team. What's the type of product or project that you're working on? What are the particular strengths and weaknesses of those individuals? And the chemistry between them. I think the first thing I would say is that you both want to be involved right from the beginning of the project. I mean, I've found it's a very common complaint from business analysts. They're not involved early enough in the scope of, in the life cycle of a project. But equally, I've heard it time and time again from user experience people. They're not involved early enough in the life cycle of a project. So I think that's the single biggest thing you can do is sit down together right at the beginning of the project and start working on that discovery, that requirements elicitation, that user research, whatever you want to call it, in a collaborative way, and that's going to help.
Fantastic. And so final question, Nick, and I know that you probably sort of covered this already, but you know, if people haven't read your book yet, and if there's a particular takeaway that you want them to take from it, other than sit the exam, because it is of course very well aligned to the BCS Foundation Certificate in User Experience, and I did find myself after I read it thinking, oh, I think I could sit it. I looked at some sample papers and thought I feel pretty confident, so I must register and do that. But other than the exam, what particular takeaways would you want people to take from reading your book?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would like them to take the exam and to pass it. But I think the thing really, user experience, it is a tool set, but it's a mindset, as Tina would say. So it's a type of reality check for projects and for other non-project work. It's about making sure that what you're doing really makes sense, not just in terms of some business case that someone's dreamt up, you know, at the beginning of the project in a workshop or sitting at their desk or wherever, and you may have done a whole load of work just based on that, and you've produced something that who knows whether it's going to meet people's needs or not. But if you're constantly studying the users. You identify who your users are and you study them in their real context, and you are constantly evaluating designs with them by getting them to try using the prototype. So not just looking at demos or commenting on documents, but actually using prototypes, and then you iteratively act on the results of those evaluations, then that will give you confidence that what you're doing is actually going to work.
Absolutely, give us confidence, and you know, and dare I say it, Nick, that idea of you know, iteratively discovering and potentially even iteratively developing and maybe even incrementally delivering sounds a little bit like you know, it fits well with some of the sort of agility, the flexible type approaches that we might hear quite a lot about these days.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think in principle, it really ought to fit absolutely like a glove. Unfortunately, with Agile, one problem you have is this obsession with delivering so-called working product increments, which gets people tend to interpret that as meaning working software, which kind of gets in the way of doing some of the important work early on in a project. But that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other conversation and an hour's webinar on itself, Nick. So, Nick, we could talk about this for an hour, and in fact, we have talked about this for an hour in the past, because on the Blackmetric YouTube channel, there's an entire webinar that you very kindly presented about user experience. So if anyone wants to know more, you can tune in. So thank you so much, Nick, for taking the time out today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Adrian. My pleasure.
Fantastic. And if you are tuning in live, you will, I'm sure, want to get your hands on a copy of Nick's book. So it is entitled User Experience Foundations. It's published by BCS. As a reminder, BCS are offering a discount to anyone that's watching this show. So all you need to do is go to the BCS website, type the BA Fringe code, and you'll get 25% off. But even more excitingly than that, the authors, Nick and Tina, were able to do quite a good bit of negotiation, and we have two books to give away. We have one of Tina's books and one of Nick's books. You can, if you're in the UK, you can have these as a physical or electronic book. If you're outside of the UK, it will probably be an electronic book for logistic reasons. We have one of each to give away, so two prizes to two lucky people. All you need to do is, again, get on social media and gloat. This time you just need to tag BA Fringe with your biggest takeaways so far on LinkedIn or Twitter. Bonus points if there's a selfie of you with the video on in the background, and tag at BCS Publishing on LinkedIn or at BCS on Twitter. As with any competition, T&Cs do apply, and you can let us know if you want to see a copy of those terms and conditions. And the prizes will be drawn a couple of days after this airs live, to give anyone who is watching on repeat, on demand, a chance to participate. But keep in mind, this is the first episode. You've probably got quite a good chance of winning, so enter, and you can enter both. You can even enter multiple times, but don't tell anyone. So that pretty much brings us to the very end of the first ever episode of BA Fringe, and I wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's tuning in live or who is watching a recording. This has been a massive undertaking. I know often people think when they view Blackmetric content that it is just me. That isn't the case at all. There's a team of people that have been able to make this happen. So a real thank you to our guests, those that have been involved in the production, the live production, and all of the preparation and production scheduling. It really is a mammoth job, and I do hope that you've enjoyed it. Now, the next episode will air on the 21st of September, and you can register for it already. So if you didn't get into the Zoom room this time and you want to have a chat with people who are actually watching it live in the Zoom room, if you go onto Blackmetric, click on events, you can register for it straight away. Please, please do tell your friends. If you've liked this format, tell people. The idea is we're going to grow it, and it will be a platform. So, if you've got a topic you want to talk about, let us know. You don't have to speak for a whole webinar. You can speak for 7 minutes, 5 minutes on a video. We can have an 11-minute chat. The idea is to bring more people, more ideas, and not just the core ideas and the core you know, the sort of core of business analysis, some of the stuff at the edges as well. Now, as a reminder, although we won't be able to do shout outs live right now, there is a WhatsApp number and a WhatsApp number and a voicemail number that you can leave us a message between episodes. So that number will be coming up on your screen relatively shortly. All you need to do is, if you're in the UK, you can just ring it. It's 0330 321 8281. If you're outside of the UK or you prefer WhatsApp, send us a WhatsApp message if you've got an idea for a segment or if you want to take part, and we'll do shout outs in a future episode. So do let people know. Remember, sharing is caring. So if you've enjoyed it, send the link on to others. But that really does conclude the very first episode of BA Fringe. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.